Hello, beloved. It's so exciting to come to you with these messages after the grave. I think from what we're hearing, many of you are being blessed and receiving great revelation for your own life. And as you go into studying the book and reading it again and again, it will unlock a lot of the things that you already know because you were in Him before the foundation of the world. So we're going to begin today by reading a scripture from the Passion Translation. It's in Hebrews 12, verse 2. We look away from the natural realm and we focus our attention and expectation onto Christ, who birthed faith within us and who leads us forward into faith's perfection. Now, what does that mean? This describes the condition that we have to fight being born into this physical dimension. Our focus is on the natural, but faith requires us rejecting the natural realm, looking away from the natural realm, and focusing our attention onto Christ, onto the resurrected Christ who birthed faith within us and leads us forward into faith's perfection. What is that perfection? The birth into Christ is the perfection of faith. I'm going to say it again. The birth into Christ, the new birth, is the perfection of faith. Because that becomes your reality. That becomes where your attention is focused. That perfection is designed inside of us to release the vision, the revelation, the understanding of the spiritual dimension. You see, we depend on our senses in the physical realm. But in faith, you don't depend on your senses. What do you depend on? You depend on the perfection of what Christ provided at resurrection. He changed the visible to the invisible. He changed our expectation and our attention from the visible to the invisible. Our reality in the natural is determined by what our senses gather as information and gives us that conglomerate of stimulation, all of the feelings, all of the memories, all of the things we've experienced. We accumulate all of this and form our reality from what our senses have gathered since we've been born. It's not easy because we spend so much of our time being bombarded by all the stimulation from this environment. Plus, we like stimulation. Physical stimulation makes us feel alive, makes us feel energetic, gives us something to wake up and do. We like to do. And it's okay. You're born physical, but that shouldn't be your personality and reality. Your personality and reality is from the invisible revelation of Christ in you. That's the perfection of faith. So as we go through these studies, as we go through our expansion of what Christ has done in your life, I want you to be constantly reminded of some fundamentals from the resurrection generation. You must know that His resurrection destroyed Satan and removed his authority from the second heaven. But if you don't believe that, then your life will be no different from those who lived in the old covenant. The conditions happening in the world today is to help us change our focus and perceptions from this limited material dimension to His unlimited supernatural kingdom. The current situation on the planet is necessary for many reasons, but most importantly, it is happening to remind us of our origin and nature. So I wanted to read that to remind you not to be so caught up in what's going on around you. It's to remind you of where you originated and what your original nature is. So I wrote down some fundamentals that we must approach everything in this physical realm from. Genesis to John. Now, why did I write that down? We're going to turn to Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, and read a verse that's very familiar to all of us. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We should all know that by now, right? This is the first time in the scriptures that it's recorded where God actually spoke. Okay, let there be light. So now let's turn over to John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay? So here we see God speaking, and in John 1:1 we see that God's Word was with Him in the beginning, in Genesis, in the beginning, and that Word was Christ. Okay? The light, right? So here's God speaking, and John recognizes that the voice and the Word were one in Christ. And the whole chapter of John 1 explains who that Word is. So let's read a couple of verses here. John 1:14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The only one ever born into this earth, full of grace and truth. You remember right before the crucifixion of Jesus, Pilate questioned, "What is truth?" You remember that? Let's take a look at that. It's in chapter 18 of John, verse 36. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from here." Okay, so he makes it clear that this world is not His kingdom. We know that God's kingdom is not from this world. Say it out loud. This world is not my kingdom. So all the rules that pertain to people living in this world do not pertain to me, because I answer to the resurrected Christ. Okay? Remind yourself every time you get caught up in the drama of this world system, you're not from this world. Look in verse 38. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews. Because Jesus had just said in verse 37, "For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." So Jesus made this statement in the presence of Pilate, so that his response, obviously Pilate was not of the truth, because he didn't recognize that voice. Right? That's why he questioned it. The truth was standing right before him. The one that John just said is full of grace and truth was standing right before him, and he says, "What is truth?" And this is what goes on in this world system. They can't hear the truth. They will never understand the truth because they are from this world system. This world system lives by the kingdom of Babylon. They have their own science. They have their own language. They have their own truth. You follow me? You're not going to hear the truth from the media. You're not going to hear the truth from your doctor. You're not going to hear the truth from anyone other than the living Word who became flesh. That's why I implore you to read the red letters. That is the Word speaking Spirit. Follow me. The Word is speaking Spirit. You remember when we talked about the quantum dilemma is how can waves become particles? That collapsed wave function, what is that? It is the Spirit becoming material. When God became flesh, it was a quantum wave function. The Spirit became matter. Jesus became physical from the Spirit. Now you've heard me say, maybe it bears repeating, matter cannot change matter. Only Spirit changes the physical. So when Jesus became flesh, He was the only one that walked this earth who had the power inside of Him to transform the material. Because He was full of grace, He was full of compassion, full of love, and His words carried that spiritual transformation that can change the physical. You see, the language and the science and the wisdom of this world system, formed in Babylon, tries to use the physical to change the physical. They're trying to use their wisdom, their knowledge from this world system to transform material. Cannot happen. Will not be anything that will be lasting. You may have a temporary change. You may take an aspirin and you feel like your headache is gone. It's a temporary change. But what you do inside your body, and we'll talk about this later, is disrupt the natural ability for the body to take care of itself. So what I want you to understand right here in these fundamental principles is that when God spoke, matter changed. When God speaks today through His Spirit that is inside of you, your physical expression, perception, reality is to change. Because you're carrying the originator of creation on the inside of you. Think about the example of the way the ark was carried by the children of Israel. They were carrying inside this gold-plated box the presence of God. During that time, wherever that ark went, the material changed. Now that's pretty fascinating when you think about it. You remember the Battle of Jericho? They marched around those walls, those impenetrable walls, with this ark, blowing their shofar, doing what Joshua was told to do by God and the high priest. And the walls came down. They carried that ark throughout the desert. And in some of the Old Testament verses by the Jewish writers, they actually talk about the people carrying the ark being lifted up off the ground. So instead of carrying the ark was carrying them. They also talked about how the ark would shoot out fire to kill scorpions and snakes in the desert. So there's all kinds of stories that we don't read in our scriptures that they talk about that the ark did. We know that the shoes did not get old and was not short for the feet. It grew with the people's feet. The clothes never became old. All of that because of the presence of God in that ark. So now, instead of God being put inside a box of wood, He's put inside our flesh. So the same kind of miracles that happened in the presence of the ark can happen in your presence. But you have to understand what's inside you. You have to know what Christ did at resurrection. So when you think about what's happening in the world and you're bombarded by all of this stuff in the atmosphere of death and COVID and all the other garbage that you hear, it doesn't affect you. Remember when Jesus walked through the earth and they gave him a coin and said, and he wanted to know, oh, what's this subscription? Who is that face on this coin? He didn't know who Caesar was. He didn't pay any attention to this world system. He had one desire, and that's to follow the will of his Father. He understood that, and that was what he was focused on. And that's what the perfection of faith does for you. It keeps you focused and puts your attention on exactly what your design and your origin is created for. Now, I say in the book that what we're witnessing now is some of the greatest and the most important time in history, because we're seeing the collapse of systems throughout the earth that have been the foundation for man to put his trust and security in. Especially governments, physicians, banks, monetary systems, economics. So now you're seeing the collapse of these things. Science today, and medicine in general, is founded on the belief of evolution. Now you tell yourself that you don't believe in evolution. You tell yourself that you know God created man. But if you're following the advice of the world system, that is the foundation that science is built on. That man evolved and that there's diseases out there that are stronger than man because God didn't create man. He evolved from nature, from this physical planet. So something stronger than man can evolve to eradicate him. You understand? So if you're believing advice from physicians who are founded in that principle, they're always going to prescribe drugs. They're always going to give you solutions that originate from that thinking of evolution. So you have to understand that. And one of the biggest lies is that bacteria and viruses are all harmful. And you need to have pasteurized products because they take out all the bacteria, and you need to wash the skin off your hands because you want to get rid of all the bacteria that could harm you. That is absolute nonsense. You were put here to steward this planet, not to be afraid of it. And this bacteria and virus nonsense is because science is so afraid and so frightened because they don't know God. So they can't give you any valid information that's going to help you. So you read these stories and these research that come from these people that talk about you need a vaccine because vaccines are going to destroy the viruses and all of the things that can harm you. No, God gave you tonsils. And when He gave you tonsils, they were put as a ring in the base of your throat with 6 little slits in these little rings, very tiny slits. And those slits served as a petri dish to take in the pathogens from the air, from your nose, from your ears, from your mouth. And they test these pathogens that come in instantaneously to see if your body has experienced those things before. And if they've experienced it, they've already created an antigen inside of your body to fight it if it can be harmful to your organs, and then your body builds an immune resistance to these pathogens. This is what the tonsils do. Back in the 1800s, in Britain alone, they took out thousands and thousands of tonsils. Well, if your body doesn't have its natural immune chemistry or laboratory, which the tonsils are, to build the immune, your body is going to get diseased. So they take vaccines and bypass the natural part of your body to build the immune system and go right into the bloodstream, and it overloads the immune system, and the body, in most cases, cannot handle it. So a lot of people down the road get sick, and some people die. So this is what science created. And this just shows you that man has no idea, has no understanding of the miraculous mechanism that the human being is. It's created to build these immune systems. So today you've got to ask yourself, why are the news and governments talking about vaccines instead of building your immune system? What is wrong with people? You build an immune system and it will take care of any disease that's in the world or on the planet. But because they don't believe in God and they believe in this Tower of Babel mentality, they're bypassing the natural system of man that builds the immune system and trying to give you something that man created synthetically to make you well. It's nonsense. And you need to trust God. You need to believe that what God gave you and prepared you with is more than sufficient to give you all of the health and divine health on top of that. Now, I know that there are really good physicians that believe in what Christ has done at resurrection. I'm not coming against physicians. I'm not coming against people that's what they've been called to do to help people. The problem they face is that the average person that comes to them is depending on their advice to give them something from the external to change their physical condition. That's the situation that most pastors face in churches. They're looking for some remedy in the third dimension to change their physical condition. The matter-changing matter thing. That is not what God put you on the planet for. I'm talking to the Christian. I'm talking to those who are followers of Christ. You have the solution. The solution is on the inside. But if you're still looking for something on the external, in the outward world, to change your physical condition, then you don't know what Christ did. You're walking around spiritually blind, asleep. And so these physicians who are trying to help the average person wake up to that reality, that's fine. That's wonderful. That's the gift that God is giving all of us, is to point people in the direction of opportunities that will awaken them, not make them dependent. You understand? We weren't put here to be dependent on this system for our identity and our purpose and validate who we think we are. We were put here to be awakened to what Christ did at resurrection. This is what these messages are designed to do, to awaken you to that reality. You can help anybody in their search, in their journey to awaken to Christ by pointing them in the direction of things that will give them the ability to physically be comfortable and awaken, but not dependent on this system. This system is designed to destroy you because it is founded on the principles of the fear of death, which Christ overcame at resurrection. I'm going to keep saying that so many times to awaken you to that reality, because you are the one that's designed to change your world because you created it. God is showing all of us who know who we are that He has always been the one that we need to trust. He is the one that you can depend on. So He's just moving the earth. It's a great earthquake, great tsunamis happening to the world system's idea of perfection and their Tower of Babel. So you're seeing right now the fall of the Tower of Babel that's been created by man with his Babylonian mentality and wisdom. So this should remind all of us where our faith and trust should be.